Hey YouTubers, this is Garrowin again with another video. In this video I'm going to be teaching you guys how to change the oil in your car. In this particular video I'm going to be changing the oil in my 2006 Ford Explorer, but the process for changing your oil is pretty much exactly the same between all vehicles. You know, the location of the filter and things might be the same, but the general procedure is the same. Now, this is the vehicle my wife usually drives. I recommend changing your oil every 3,000 miles with average driving. A lot of the booklets nowadays that come with your vehicles will recommend 5,000. My Dodge even says 7,500 unless certain conditions are met. I do all of mine at 3,000, and I recommend most people do theirs at 3,000 because if you go 5,000 or 7,000 miles without changing your oil, you're going to wear your engine out. So a lot of vehicles have this new little light that comes on the screen in here that tells you your oil change is required. If that comes on, you've hit about the 5,000 mile mark. So let's go out here and let's see what we need to do. Alright, so the first thing we need to talk about is what you need ahead of time before you get started. You're going to need your replacement oil. You're going to need a socket set and a ratchet. You're going to need a replacement filter. You're going to need a funnel. You're going to need a filter wrench, a pair of gloves, and you're going to need an oil pan. The oil pan we're going to collect the old oil in, and I usually take it down to the Advanced Auto Parts and just turn it into them when they recycle it. Or if there's not a whole lot in it, you could just burn it on a campfire or whatever. The replacement oil, you need to make sure you get the right kind of oil. There's 5W30, 5W20, 1030. There's all these different kinds of oils. You need to make sure that you have the right kind, and you need to make sure that you have the proper amount. This Explorer takes like 4.9 quarts, so I'm just going to put 5 quarts in it. That much over isn't going to hurt it, but you don't want to only buy 5 quarts if your vehicle takes 6 quarts. So make sure you have the right kind and the right amount. I also, at every oil change, pour a bottle of this in the fuel tank. If you do this, make sure that your fuel tank is completely full when you pour this in there so that you're not diluting your gas down too much. Now, another thing I usually do when I change the oil is I also grease my front end. So we can't do that on the Explorer, but I just wanted to show you what a grease gun looks like. If your vehicle has grease plugs on the front end, you could go ahead and grease the front end while you're waiting on the oil to drain. And I also rotate my tires. Now, the first thing we need to do is get the old oil started draining. So let's go ahead and get over there and I'll show you guys what you need to do. Now, there's two major parts that you're going to be concerned with, or three major points on the engine that you're going to be concerned with when it comes to changing your oil. You have your oil filler cap, which is marked 5W30 in case you don't know what kind to get. We're going to go ahead and take this off, even though we're not filling it yet, just to make sure that all of the oil can drain out. Make sure there's no kind of vacuum or something that slows the draining of the oil. You have your oil dipstick right here, which you can use to check the oil. If you're not 100% certain how much it takes, you can pour it in, let it set for a while, and then use your dipstick to check it. You want to make sure that you park the vehicle on a slope, because most of the time your oil drain plug is going to be toward the back of your oil pan, and you don't want a whole lot of oil sitting in a recessed area because you had your vehicle angled the wrong way. So on the underside here, up toward the front, you can see you've got your oil drain plug right there. Now, you may see other parts connected to your axles and your front end. Your oil drain plug is usually going to be pretty obvious. If you're not sure if it's the right fluid, back it out until a little bit of the fluid starts to drip out. If it's any color other than brown or black, you've got the wrong one. But I'm pretty sure once you see it, you'll know what you're looking at, because it's the only thing that you won't see any parts really coming out the side of it, and it'll be sticking down like this. And then your oil filter, mine particularly is right there. The location of the oil filter is it differs from vehicle to vehicle. Sometimes you can see it from up top, sometimes you can't, but it's a round canister looking thing that just screws onto the side of your engine. I'll show you what the new one looks like here. Now, the color of the oil filter is not really relevant. That'll be different depending on the manufacturer. Here's the new one. You see it's got these rubber grips on it, and it's an orange color. The old one was white. There's still the right filter, but this is the general shape and everything that it's going to look like. Alright, so the first thing we got to do is we got to get our oil pan under there, under the drain plug, and take the drain plug loose so that it can start draining the old oil into the pan. Now another thing you'll want to make sure of before you start draining your oil is that you run the engine for 5-10 minutes before you actually start changing your oil, especially if it's cold outside, because when the oil is cold it thickens up and it doesn't want to drain as fast. Now you can see on the bottom here we've taken loose our oil drain plug, and the oil is draining into the pan here. You might not be able to see it on camera, but you can hear it. You want to let it drain until it's just dripping. If there's a steady drip or a drizzle, let it go, and just let it go until it's done. Once it gets down to a drip, we'll know that the oil is mostly gone, and we'll take the oil filter off. And this is probably going to take 5 or 10 minutes, so I'll catch up with you guys later. Just wanted to point out a fact. This is why you might want gloves, because by running the engine for 5 or 10 minutes to get the oil to come out faster, the oil is going to be hot. Sometimes hot enough to burn you, depending on the vehicle. And when I popped that oil, the drain plug out, it just gushed all over me. And that's going to happen. You can't avoid that. So that's why I recommend having a good pair of gloves, and maybe even some glasses, because if that oil gets in your eyes, it burns. There you go. Alright, so the oil is mostly drained out of the drain plug. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the old oil filter, and we're going to put the new oil filter on in its place. Now there's a little something I like to do before I put the new filter on. I'll take the new filter and I'll kind of set it out, and what I'll do is I'll just pour a little bit of oil around this rubber seal and around these threads to kind of help it go on there smoothly with as little friction as possible. Doesn't have to be a ton, but enough to lubricate that seal. You pour a little bit on there, and then just kind of rub it around with your finger here, down in the threads here, and that's fine right there. Put the cap back on. Now we removed the oil drain plug with our socket set. We're going to remove and install the oil filter with the filter wrench. Alright, it looks like this. There are different sizes. If you're going to buy one, make sure you get one that will fit your filter. Alright, if you're holding it like this, you pull away, the filter tightens. So if you're wanting to loosen your filter, you would put it on with the handle on the right side and it would loosen. If you want to tighten it, you would put it on with the handle on the left side and it would tighten it. Alright, so the first thing we got to do is take our old one off and drop it down in our drain pan. I'll set this one up here for now. Now, she's going to film, you can see right there the old filter. Yeah, it's mostly done here. I'm going to try it. I hate changing the filter on this one, it's hard to get to. Now, it's another thing to remember here. You are probably going to get oil on you. In fact, you will get oil on your hands. So if it's burning hot, the engine was just running recently, you may want to wait a few minutes before you do this. Alright, because this oil filter, and most of the vehicles I've changed them on, points upward. So as soon as you let it loose and it breaks that seal, the oil is going to run in the direction that gravity pulls it, which is right where my arm is. Alright, so it's just up to you. It's finger loose now. Scoot the oil pan down here. And get the oil pan under it. Alright. Now because we let most of the oil drain before we did that, it's only going to drip for a couple of minutes. Not even a couple of minutes, maybe maybe 1 minute, 60 seconds. By the time we get the new filter down there, most of that'll be done. You're never going to get all of the every single drop of the old oil out. That's just a fact of life. Alright, this is why you keep the paper towels around. Alright, so we've got our new filter lubed up, ready to go. Now the way I usually install it, one thing you want to check for on the old filter, this rubber seal over time with heat and pressure tends to like to stick to the side of your engine. You want to make sure that the seal on the old filter came off, because if it's still stuck to the side of the engine and you try to put this on, as soon as that engine compression hits, it's going to pop through that seal and spill all your new oil out on the ground. And then you've got to get a ride down to the store to buy some more. So, let me check the old oil filter, see if it's on there. If it's not, I'll check the side of the engine. Yeah, it's on the side of the old filter. I ain't going to pull it out of here because it's covered in oil. Alright, so, next task, install the new oil filter. I usually install it finger tight, and then I'll tighten it about a half a turn tighter than that with the filter wrench, and that's plenty. There's no need to tighten down on it until it busts, because it's not going to have that much pressure on it. It's just a filter. Alright, you can kind of seat it until it, and you can kind of feel it. There we go. Now I have never cross-threaded an oil filter. I don't know why. Something about the way their threads are done. You can't. I've never cross-threaded one. But you do want to make sure that if there's any resistance before it gets all the way up there, that you take it off and double check everything. There we go. That's plenty tight enough. It's not going nowhere. We still got a little bit of a drip here, but I think we're going to be fine, because 99% of the oil is out. That's just sludge in the bottom of the oil pan dripping out from that Valvoline oil. Alright, so the next thing we got to do here is we got our old drain plug. We're going to put it back in the bottom of the oil pan. I can see my little seal here kind of slid up. That's why it was. Push that back down. Make sure there's no dirt or grime around this, and set your ratchet to tighten, and we'll get down here. Okay, so I'm just going to put it in with my fingers. Alright, make sure you don't cross thread it, because this is aluminum. Tighten it up as much as you can with your fingers, and this is something that you do not want to bear down on too tight. Put it finger tight, and then you won't even do half a turn with the ratchet, because it won't do that without ripping it. Alright, but you can feel when it wants to stop, and then just crank one time, and then when you encounter a good amount of resistance, stop. Alright, because it's going to seal itself. We slide the oil pan with the old oil back out. It's pretty full from yesterday too. So get your tools out from under the vehicle. So now we've got the old filter off. I haven't been using my gloves because they're covered in oil and I wouldn't have been able to grip anything. Alright, here's where the funnel comes in. Because you see how big around this is? When you start pouring it out of this big old jug, it's a lot easier to hit that than it is that small hole. Now check the inside of your funnel. This one is pretty clean. If there's a single speck of dirt, it won't hurt anything, because that'll just get crushed up and burned inside the engine. But if you have an excessive amount of dirt or dust or material inside your funnel, wipe it out a little bit. Alright. Now this one takes, just say 5 quarts of oil, so it's going to take this whole jug. Alright. We shake it up a little bit, and we pour it in there. Oh, hang on, our little foil's getting in the way there. There it goes. And then once it gets to this point, unless the oil is pretty warm, I'll usually just kind of stand it here and let it sit for 5 minutes to make sure that as much of this oil gets out of the bottle as possible. So we've had this sitting in here for a minute. It's going to keep dripping forever, but that's fine. We've got 5 quarts of oil in there. Shake that off. Tighten our oil cap back down. Now at this point, even if you check the oil, your reading is going to be way off because it takes a while for that oil to drain down through the engine. So we're going to go ahead, put the cap back on here, get our box out of here, get all of our tools out of the engine compartment. Alright. And then what we're going to do is you want to start the engine, and as soon as you start it, you want to look underneath the engine to make sure that there's no oil leaks. For example, let's say you forgot to check for the old rubber seal off the old filter and it was on the side of the engine. If you don't realize that, when you start the engine, it's going to pop that seal, and so that's why as soon as you're done pouring your oil in, you want to start it and then check for leaks to make sure everything's tight. Yeah, alright. So now we're going to look under it now that the engine's running. Alright. And you can see that there's no leaks. If there was a leak that you should be concerned about, you would know right away. And you should kill the engine and rectify whatever the problem is. Alright. So now we're going to let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes and then check the oil level using the dipstick. In fact, let's go ahead and do it now. I know the engine was just running, but I want to see if it's slung up on that dipstick, why you don't want to check it immediately after filling it or immediately after having the engine running. Alright. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but you got oil up to here and all the way up this dipstick here. So it's really kind of hard to tell exactly where the level is at the moment because the oil has not yet all drained down into the engine, especially since we just had it running. So once you pour the oil in, start it, check for leaks, shut the engine off, let it set for 10 minutes, then check your oil level, and that should give you an accurate reading. So that's the basics of checking and changing the oil in your vehicle. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, feel free to post them below. Now, like I said, at oil changes, it's a good time to also do some other regular maintenance. I use my oil change schedule to do other things like rotate my tires, grease my front end of my pickup because it actually has grease plugs, pour some fuel injector cleaner into the gas tank, things of that nature. So changing your oil is a very important part of just basic vehicle maintenance. If you're going to own a car, I think you ought to know how to at least do the basic stuff to keep it running in good condition. And changing your oil is something that you've got to do very regularly that can keep and that can make the difference between a car lasting 150 or 400,000 miles. So this is Garrowing out. Y'all have a good one. Alrighty, quick caveat to this video. I'm going to show you guys how to go about resetting the timer on this particular vehicle. Most newer cars have a built-in oil change thing, and normally when you get it changed at a shop, they'll reset this timer, but there is no sensor on the oil filter or anything that resets the timer. So if you change the oil yourself, you're also going to have to come in here and reset this timer yourself, and this is how you do it on a 2006 Ford Explorer XLT. The way you do it is probably going to be a little bit different depending on the vehicle, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the procedures on this vehicle. Alright, so you've got your reset little peg here. That's the only button. You press it once, it'll clear that. And we keep pressing it until it says set up, hold, reset. Alright, we're going to hold down that button until it says we're going to hit reset for system check. And it says oil change required. And when it says hold reset if new oil, you hold that button until it says oil change set to 100%. Alright, it's one of those things where you've got to hit it right when it asks for it, or else it's just going to go on to the next stage of the check. And after you do that, it's going to go ahead and run through all of the other stuff here. And then that's it. Now, this timer will not reset if you disconnect the battery. So if you can't figure out how to do it in the computer yourself, go ahead and Google how to do it in your vehicle, because disconnecting the battery will not reset the oil change timer, at least in this vehicle. It's one of those things, it's like your odometer. You could disconnect the battery for 3 or 4 days, come back, and it's still going to remember that it needs to have an oil change, or at least that the timer needs to be reset. So now, when we start this vehicle, the only warning I should get is that my washer fluid is low. Washer fluid low. We clear that one, and we're good to go. So that's how you reset the oil timer on this particular vehicle. If you have a newer vehicle that has one, look up how to change it yourself, because if you change your own oil, you will have to reset the timer yourself.